Welcome to Now Let's Talk, the podcast with Vanessa Corwin and Kathleen Kahn, where we speak with our guests about the joys and challenges of life in today's world.
Hello, I'm Vanessa Corwin.
And I'm Kathleen Kahn.
Trump's war with Iran has taken center stage globally in the news cycle, relegating the war between Russia and Ukraine to the background. Yet, these wars are connected. With us today is Professor Alexander Motyl, Ukraine and Russia expert at Rutgers University, to shed some light on this complex situation. Welcome, Alex. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. As always, it's a great pleasure.
So, Alex, let's just dive right in. We have a lot to cover today. So to start us off, could you give us a brief overview of how the wars in Ukraine and Iran connected? I mean, are they separate conflicts or are they part of some bigger worldwide scheme?
It's probably the latter. I mean, it's a little too soon to tell with any degree of certainty. I mean, we'll let the historians figure this out. But with the end of the Cold War, with Trump's decision to upend the security architecture, his pursuit of a kind of ruthless policy regarding, ruthless foreign policy, all that mirrors Vladimir Putin's approach to foreign policy as well. And in effect, both of them are adopting the approach of might makes right. And in that particular sense, I mean, both of these wars are instances of, let's call them overriding imperial powers or pretenders to imperial status, trying to impose their will on smaller countries. Now, again, at this point, I'm not suggesting that the Ukrainians are like the Iranians, other than the fact that they've been attacked by Putin. But clearly, when it comes to ethical issues, I mean, the regime in Iran is detestable, whereas the so-called regime in Kiev is actually quite nice. But that having been said, in effect, both Trump and Putin are flexing their muscles and trying to impose their vision of the world on these two countries, rightly or wrongly. Both have also underestimated the degree to which their opponents are actually resilient, powerful, and perhaps even legitimate. Clearly, Putin thought the war would be over in 3 days and he'd be welcomed in Kiev. That turned out to be a crass over-expectation. I mean, we're in the 5th year of the war and he's no closer to achieving his goals than he was then. And so too Trump, presumably influenced by the ease with which he was able to kidnap Maduro of Venezuela, figure that, throw a few bombs on the Iranians, and that would be that. As it turned out, that is not that. It's anything but that. And just as Putin is now stuck in a quagmire that's lasted for 5 years, so too it's quite possible that Mr. Trump will be stuck in a quagmire of his own making as well. And of course, I mean, who knows, what will happen during the presidential elections. But this mess that he's created will certainly be part of his administration for the next 2.5 years. And in all likelihood will affect whoever happens to succeed him.
So how do you see the Iran war changing the dynamic between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, what it's done, but only up to a certain degree. Again, many of the people who focus on this have said, well, the price of oil has gone up from something like $65 a barrel to, I think the latest estimate is 102. It was as high as 110, 115. And of course, Russia, being an oil exporter, is benefiting greatly from this. So in that sense, the two conflicts are very much intimately related. At the same time, the Ukrainians have been very, very, very effective in destroying the energy infrastructure of Russia. So Putin's windfall, which was expected to be in the billions of dollars, is roughly half of what he was expecting. But that said, it's not quite as impressive as people thought. Again, thanks to the Ukrainians' effective utilization of drones and drone warfare.
how is the Iran war affecting the flow of United States weapons to Ukraine? I thought they stopped.
Well, effectively, they've stopped. If you look at the statistic, I mean, over the last year, I believe the administration has provided something like 1% of what the Biden administration provided, which is to say zero. That said, I mean, there is a program that's been conceived together with the Europeans, whereby the Americans supposedly sell weapons to the Europeans, who then give the weapons to the Ukrainians at very reasonable rates, or perhaps even for free. The problem with that is that it all depends on U.S. willingness to sell weapons. Now, in a normal world, the United States would have a lot of weapons to sell and could make a nice profit and do the right thing, although heaven forbid that we should speak in those terms when it comes to Trump. But as you know, the amount of missiles, Tomahawk missiles, cruise missiles, Patriot missiles that's been expended on the Iran war has by far exceeded the total amount that was given by the United States to Ukraine. And now the United States is supposedly suffering from a potential armaments shortage, which again, thanks to Mr. Trump, he's not only made Ukraine more vulnerable, he's not only failed to achieve his goals in Iran, but he's arguably made the United States more vulnerable. Again, there's no immediate threat, thank God. But the whole point of having weapons in reserve is to have weapons in reserve just in case something happens. So that, of course, means, so it's not as if the United States under Trump was willing or interested in giving weaponry to the Ukrainians, but it probably will affect the ability of the Europeans to buy weapons from the Americans.
It's terrible to hear that the United States is running out of critical weapons. I mean, this is the United States, but that's basically what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, this is Trump's major achievement in the Iran war. It's not he hasn't defeated the regime. He's in a way defeated the United States. And again, I'm not an expert on armaments, but I'm told that it takes a long time to produce the requisite number of Patriot missiles and so on. I mean, it's not the sort of thing, it's not like building a drone, which the Ukrainians can do in their garage. But, so it will take a while, a number of years, how many, I don't know, for the United States to catch up. Why not learn from the Ukrainians and develop far cheaper ways and far easier ways of developing armaments? And as you know, the Ukrainians actually made an offer to the Americans. It was about half a year ago that they were willing to share their technical knowledge in the making of drones. And the U.S. said thanks, but no thanks, which is totally idiotic.
That's crazy. Now, speaking of drones, we know that Russia used Iranian drones earlier in the war. Now, has the U.S. war with Iran changed this? And Russia, I believe, is producing their own drones now. Is that right?
Yes, the Russians are, are producing more than enough. They're no longer dependent on the Iranians. And at this point, my guess is that not only are the Russians less interested, but the Iranians would also be less interested. They need the weapons for their own needs. But the fact is that we focus on the enormous strides that the Ukrainians have made in developing drones, and that's absolutely justified. But we tend often to ignore the fact that Russia is effectively playing catch up, but doing so in a very effective manner. I mean, they are catching up. So the Ukrainians have to always be one step ahead, but it's not as if the Russians are far behind in the dust.
One of my least favorite words are the deal.
Oh, God.
It's been reported, since you just said what you said, that Trump is working on a deal which Ukraine would provide military technology. Is that really off the charts now? It's not going to happen.
Well, it could happen. With Trump, anything is possible. So it's conceivable that something along these lines may now be in the works. I did read a few days ago that apparently the United States has sent some soldiers, again, how many is not clear, to Ukraine to pick up battlefield experience and using drones. I mean, they won't be fighting; they'll be observing and learning. That's interesting
Mm.
and symbolically important, even though it hasn't really gotten any press. But the fact is that officially there will be American soldiers in Ukraine, which is which is probably going to give Putin sleepless nights, as well it should. But you know how many they could have been doing this a year and a half or 2 years ago and
Yeah.
really learn. But I suppose better late than never. But it's still a question of how many and what exactly their roles will be.
Do you think that Ukraine is rethinking its battlefield strategies because of events in Iran?
I think the events in Iran, the war in Iran, has reinforced the Ukrainian views that what they're doing is the right thing. You know, the United States still has this image of war being fought by big tanks, big ships, big cars, big
Mhm.
weapons, big rockets. And obviously, that, you know, it's not as if those things have become irrelevant altogether. I mean, but that having been said, the Ukrainians have demonstrated that cheaply produced drones, you know, one of their drones costs about $3 to $4 or $5,000, which is nothing compared to what the budget is in the Pentagon. But they've shown that these drones, and of course the Russians have shown this too, by the way, they've
Mhm.
shown that the future is drone warfare.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, a $4,000 drone can destroy a $10 million tank.
Mm.
That's right.
And you can just do the math, and it doesn't require, I mean, one doesn't have to be an Einstein to recognize the fact that the future is with the drones. Now, how will it develop at this point? Again, no one quite knows. But what the Ukrainians have begun doing, and apparently quite effectively, is developing ground drones or ground robots, which thus far have been used primarily for delivering supplies to frontline troops and for
Mhm.
taking wounded soldiers back to behind the lines. But there was apparently an incident, or about 2, 3 weeks ago, where a whole bunch of Ukrainian ground robots defeated a Russian unit, and some of the Russians even surrendered to the
Wow.
robots.
Wow.
Why
Now,
didn't we hear about this?
right, you know, this is big. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a one-off. I don't know if the Ukrainians are, I guess I'm sure the Ukrainians are planning to do this more often, but it's obviously big because it suggests that, you know, the future will involve mechanized robots on the battlefield.
So now, moving on to the economic effects of these wars. So we know that rising oil prices are one of the biggest global consequences of this Iranian war. Russia is making money by selling their oil. The Strait of Hormuz is blocked, and there's little chance of resolution to this war, unstable ceasefire. And it's been reported that Russia is sending military and commercial goods to Iran using the Caspian Sea. So does sending these resources to Iran affect Russia's ability to fund their conflict with Ukraine?
Probably not effectively. I mean, maybe to some degree, but I can't imagine that Putin would harm his, you know, war efforts at home in order to help the Iranians. But that said, you know, he is supplying the Iranians with some parts, with some technology, and these are the sorts of things that the Russians probably have in abundance. And he's making a statement more than anything else. I mean, if the United States thinks it can just, you know, defeat Iran easily, well, you know, now that you've globalized the war and actually included the entire globe, the entire world in the consequences of the war, yeah, here's a taste of your own medicine. I don't think it's going to make any significant difference in the ability of the Iranians to fight back. On the other hand, it probably will affect their feelings about how, about their position vis-a-vis Trump. It's been argued, and I think correctly, that the Iranians now feel that they hold the cards,
Yes.
the
I
proverbial cards.
I agree. I agree with that. Yeah.
But,
I mean, they've got the straight.
And they've got the straight, and then they still have the straight. And the world economy is suffering immensely. So too are Americans. Maybe less so the economy overall, but certainly when you go to the gas pump, I mean, Americans are paying $1.50 more than they were just a few weeks ago, and that's not likely to
That's right.
change anytime soon.
does these higher energy prices affect also Ukraine? And we know it affects the allies, correct?
Well, Ukraine has been battered by the Russians. I mean, its energy infrastructure, that it's been living on a kind of lifeline of support, on minimal usage of energy for the last 2, maybe even 3 years. So in a way, I mean, the Ukrainians are affected in the sense that everybody is affected, but are they going to be as affected as, say, the Europeans or other countries? Probably not, simply because the Ukrainians have already experienced such turmoil vis-a-vis the energy, their energy.
Yeah.
Then why did we hear about blackouts in Russia if they have access to energy?
Oh, well, that's partly because, for one thing, some parts of the country have access to more energy than other parts, those that are deemed politically critical or economically important. So that's partly a political decision. It also suggests that the Ukrainian targeting of energy infrastructure is having an effect and is forcing the Kremlin to decide which regions it prefers to other regions. It's probably a function of corruption. I mean, why am I saying probably? It's definitely a function of corruption. I mean, one has to start with the assumption that everything in Russia transpires in a corrupt fashion. So somebody's probably
Yeah, we wouldn't know anything about that, right? In
Oh
our
no, I mean
country.
what, corruption? How did that
Yeah.
in Casablanca, right? I mean, you mean money, corruption in Casablanca?
Yeah,
No,
like
no.
what? So on the diplomatic front now, do you think the current situation plays into Putin's kind of strategy of outlasting Western support for Ukraine, and Trump's indecisiveness and inability to resolve the Iranian conflict? Does Russia have an advantage because of that?
Not really. Aside from the fact that the energy windfall isn't quite as large as they were hoping. But remember, I mean, the Russians are losing something like 35,000 soldiers every single month, which is just about as much, if not more, than they're recruiting per month. You can't sustain that. That's just not going to work. So the Russians are at best caught in a stalemate on the front. At worst, they're losing. And they don't know what to do. They've been applying war drones and so on, but to little effect over the last 2 months. The Ukrainians have actually gained a little more territory than they lost. It's always been, the Ukrainians have always been losing some territory, bits and pieces. Over the last 2 months, that's changed. It's now the Russians who are losing territory. Again, very minimally, but even so, this may portend something in the future.
You said before that some troops are heading towards Ukraine just to watch and learn. Does that mean the Americans don't have this capacity for drones?
That technology obviously exists, but also in the
Yeah.
United States. We're talking about bigger drones that have a payload of several, of not just several kilograms of weaponry, but, significant bombs of various kinds. We're talking about drones that could intercept drones. We're talking about drones that can be fired long distances and shorter distances. So the technology appears to be extremely sophisticated, rapidly changing in order to keep up with the demands of the times. So, at the end of the day, whenever this war ends, the two countries in the world with the best drone capacities will be Ukraine and Russia.
Now, how about peace talks to end the Ukraine war? What's happening with that, if anything?
Well, it's not going anywhere. I mean, it wasn't going anywhere from the get-go, to be honest. I mean, the notion that somehow a peace could be arranged, I won't even mention the 24 hours, but that a peace could be arranged quickly and relatively easily by sending two real estate guys to Moscow.
Exactly.
I mean, the very notion that this is even conceivable is just absurd. I believe, when the United States negotiated to end the war in Vietnam, it took something like 6 or 7 years. The negotiations regarding the limitations on Iran's use of nuclear weaponry and energy under Barack Obama, those two lasted for something like 7 or 8 years. These things take time. And besides, and in each of those instances, or in past instances of negotiations, both sides send seasoned diplomats who know what the game is like, who understand the opponent, who know the history, the culture, the politics, maybe even the language, and who are in a position to judge whether they're getting a good deal or not. And instead, Trump sends his son-in-law and his buddy, both of whom have no experience negotiating with tough negotiators, who know nothing about international relations, who know nothing about Russia, who know nothing about Ukraine. I mean, how can you possibly expect anything from a bunch of clowns?
Exactly. For sure.
But with a bunch of clowns, we're talking about a non-starter that has remained a non-starter and is still a non-starter and will continue to be so as long as Witkoff and Kushner and Trump have anything to say about it.
Yeah, I love your term for Witkoff. I think in another one of our podcasts, you called him Witless Witkoff.
Oh, yes. Good Lord. I mean, the guy didn't even know the names of the provinces that he was hoping to donate to Russia. I mean, how can you do that? I mean, it would be like being a real estate agent in New York and thinking that the price of real estate on Fifth Avenue and 80th Street is the lowest in the city. I mean, if you go into negotiations with that kind of knowledge,
there you go.
You are likely to be taken for a ride.
Yep.
You would think they would wake up by now and see.
You would think. But the problem is, of course, everything depends on Trump, and everybody else is just a yes man or a yes woman. And Trump is absolutely persuaded that he's God's gift to mankind.
Oh, can I tell you something that I just heard on the news a little while ago? The first thing that Trump did after leaving China on his social media said, China has a ballroom and we're going to have a ballroom.
Oh, my God.
I swear to God, that's what he said. I can't believe it.
I know.
It's insane. And then also, so I believe it was yesterday, Trump was on Fox News and he said that she told him that, oh yeah, we'd like to help you open the Straits of Hormuz, and that we are not going to give Iran any military equipment. Now, do you believe this?
No, not for a second. That they will try to open the straits, of course, but the question is on whose terms. I can't imagine the Chinese saying that we agree absolutely with everything that Chairman Trump has to say and wants. The Chinese are always, I mean, you listen to their statements about the Russia-Ukrainian war or any other conflict, and they're always anodyne. They say things like, we support peace and we support international law. Well, of course, the only thing that they fail to mention is apple pie and mom, right? But basically, that's the position they take, which is the appropriate position. If you look at it from their point of view, let the Americans stew, let the Americans pay the price for their stupidity, and we will simply express our willingness to help out. And at some point, that willingness may be translated into reality, but at that point, the United States will be begging for help.
Exactly. Now, let me ask you something. Trump ripped up the Obama peace thing with Iran, didn't he? The straits were open. Iran promised or said they would not do any nuclear weapons. And is that not true? He hates them so much he just tore that all up.
He
And now,
just tore it up.
Yeah.
They signed the deal. Every expert that I've read says that it was a pretty good deal. I mean, it came
Yeah.
short of forbidding the development, of nuclear energy and nuclear weapons,
yes,
but it delayed things by 10 or 15 or 20 years.
Right.
It cut back significantly on their ability to develop certain kinds of uranium, and was by any measure a step forward. Certainly wasn't a
Right.
step backward.
And they were willing to allow outside inspections, were they
Oh,
not?
yes, of course,
yes,
of course. And instead, Trump comes in, rips it up in two, and says this
Yeah.
isn't going to work.
yeah,
This is simply agreeing to Iran's terms. And now we're back. Now we're in this position. The irony would be, I mean, the irony is sweet, and it would be sweeter if it weren't for such a tragic, if it weren't for the tragedy of so many people being killed.
Exactly.
But now he's forced essentially to adopt a deal that is likely to be worse than Obama's.
Yes. Oh, yes.
question.
No question about that.
And of
So,
course, he'll spin it as an enormous victory.
of course.
And his MAGA supporters will say, see, we told you so. He is Jesus Christ.
Oh, gee. Or a very Jesus-like doctor.
Right.
A doctor who wears like weird costumes,
And has light emanating from his
Oh,
palm.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
My physician is the same. I mean, he turns on and off that light, and it's just amazing what the technology can do.
Amazing, isn't it? So, is there any scenario that you can think of where this conflict might benefit Ukraine? And does anybody benefit from these wars? Who benefits more?
You mean from the Iran war or from both wars?
From both wars.
Well, the Iran war certainly doesn't benefit Ukraine, but it doesn't necessarily harm it either, and at least not excessively. The Ukrainians produce 90% of their own weaponry. They have said that they are, European intelligence is not quite as good as American intelligence, but probably close enough. So in effect, they can live without America. And Zelensky has recently made that fairly clear. And that's one of the positive results of this whole brouhaha, that the Ukrainians have been forced to adopt measures that increase their sense of independence and give them greater room for maneuver. And the same, of course, is true for the Europeans. I mean, they've been forced to take their own security more seriously, which is a good thing. The war in Ukraine, obviously, the death and the destruction obviously is no good for anybody. And as you know, I think it was yesterday when the Russians fired a whole bunch of missiles on Kiev, they killed 24 people. 24 people. I don't think Kiev or just about any city has had that many losses in a single night. So obviously that's bad. But abstracting from the fact that, hundreds and thousands of people are suffering or have suffered or have been killed or are in difficult economic or physical straits, what Ukraine has benefited from, and this is not inconsequential, it's developed a stronger state, right? I mean, Zelensky has anchored the position of president. He's been doing a good job. He's criticized, probably justifiably, but nevertheless, he's been doing a good job. So the Ukrainians can now actually claim to have a more or less functioning, effective state administration. They certainly have a very effective army and armed forces in general. And the war, for better or for worse, has also consolidated the people around a Ukrainian national identity. And that's not just true of ethnic Ukrainians. It's true as Jewish Ukrainians, Hungarian Ukrainians, Russian-speaking Ukrainians, basically everybody who considers Ukraine to be their homeland has pretty much rallied in support of the country and support of Zelensky and so on. So at the end of the day, Ukraine is likely to come out of this with a stronger political system, which is good, because that's a prerequisite of any kind of significant economic reforms. It will be able to defend itself militarily, which is absolutely, again, imperative because you can't rely on the Americans or, for that matter, on the Europeans. And finally, it'll come out with a bona fide nation that is likely to be diverse and pretty tolerant of diversity.
Yeah.
Which begins to sound like a fairly livable place.
Yes.
That will stand in stark contrast to whatever remains of Russia, because it's not going to have as effective a state administration. Its army has been battered, and its sense of identity has gotten a little stronger in some sectors, but has also gotten weaker in others. Again, one has to keep in mind that all this is transpiring as hundreds and thousands are being killed and millions have fled. So that's obviously the very, very bad news.
Is it true that I have to ask that Putin was hiding in a bunker?
Well, he does appear to have appeared at the Victory Day parade on May 9th. But
Right.
other than that, he's said, there have been credible reports that he's been hiding in a bunker
That's what I heard.
in South Russia off the Black Sea coast. He's been avoiding his bunkers in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
He apparently doesn't permit anyone with a cell phone to be within close proximity of him because he believes that they can be used.
They can be tracked. They can be tracked. Yeah.
Sure.
So he's become decidedly paranoid,
Oh, good.
perhaps rightly so. But the interesting question is paranoid because of what? Well, on the one hand, he may be fearful that the Ukrainians who now have this fairly sophisticated drone capacity might be out to get him. That's probably true, but as far as you know, they haven't really tried, so maybe they're simply hatching a plot. The other possibility, which to my mind is as plausible or even more plausible at this particular point in time, is that Putin is fearful of his own people.
Ah,
When you're a tyrant, sooner
Yeah.
or later you lock yourself up in your fortress.
right.
And there are significant indications within the last few weeks that a growing number of formerly very patriotic, very pro-Putin Russians, public officials, military bloggers, people like that, they've started saying that the war is lost, that Putin is a war criminal. One guy even wrote that he should be taken to Nuremberg,
Oh,
right? But the point
This is a Russian who wrote this?
These are all Russians.
Yeah.
In Russia. Russians in Russia. Because the Russians outside of Russia, they're always cursing out Putin. But it's easy to do that when you're sipping a beer in Berlin. These are people who actually live in the country.
wow.
And evidently they are not afraid. And that's very important.
Yes.
And they've been extremely critical. And when you add up that picture with the dismal performance at the Victory Day parade, the fact that Putin is hiding, obviously, from somebody, and add to that the fact that people within the government are increasingly voicing their concern about the dismal state of the economy. And everybody knows that the only solution to the dismal state of the economy is ending the war. But you can't quite say that. So they kind of hem and haw. But the bottom line is you have to end the war. But who's stopping them from ending the war? Mr. Putin.
Mr. Putin.
So
Of course.
ultimately, any critique of the economy is ultimately a critique of Putin.
Yep.
That's not far away from what's happening here. I mean, we could end the war in Iran. It's up to Trump.
It's up to Trump, yeah. I mean, and both of them are, and again, we talked about parallels before. The other parallel is that both of them are trapped in a trap of their own making. This is, of course, the
Yes.
delicious irony. Alas, people are dying, but
Yeah.
both are now in this position where extricating yourself is extremely difficult, and extricating yourself with some degree of honor and some sense of victory is even more difficult.
Yeah.
How do you do that
Right.
and not provoke a rebellion within your own ranks? Now, again, my guess is that Putin is in greater trouble than Trump. I don't think Putin has like 30% of the population supporting
Wow.
him as diehards, but certainly both men are trapped in traps of their own making.
Yep. Indeed. Now, just recently learned that the Saudis and the Emiratis actually did launch attacks on Iran, which sounds like escalation to me. So, what happens if this war just escalates and drags on and on and on and on? What are the consequences for Ukraine
Well,
and Russia?
the consequences for Ukraine and Russia, if the war continues, we can imagine a continued projection of energy windfall resources for the Russians. What will probably happen is that the attention of many parts of the world will be focused completely on the Middle East, and the Ukraine war with Russia will go to a back burner. That's already happened. That's not necessarily a bad thing for Ukraine, because it forces them to adopt a position of their own, strengthen their own military, navigate amongst these various players, search for alliances, which Zelensky has done very effectively.
Mm-hmm.
He signed all sorts of deals with the Arab states. He's working on deals with the Europeans. So he's smart. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. So in principle, that might mean very little for Ukraine per se.
Hmm.
Now, that having been said, again, depending on how the war in the Middle East evolves, there may be a sudden need on various sides for advanced drone technology, in which case the Russians and the Ukrainians, I'm sure, will be proposing what they have. And the Ukrainians could actually, and the Russians obviously, but certainly the Ukrainians could probably make a bundle in the process. But
Interesting. Yeah.
the war in the Middle East, I mean, the most obvious consequence will be, well, twofold. Well, aside from the fact that Iranians will die, which is probably the most important one, but increasingly the likelihood of American soldiers being deployed and
Mm-hmm.
killed will grow exponentially. Because sooner or later, this kind of stalemate really can't continue unless you find an off-ramp. And
Yeah.
so far, Trump hasn't found that. But if he escalates and if the Iranians escalate and if everybody starts escalating, at some point, the military will have to go in. And at that point, the casualties suffered by the American
Mm.
side will rise enormously. And of course, the world economy will continue to be in the toilet.
Mm.
What is at this point in time,
That too.
the markets are expecting or hoping that energy prices will at some point fall. But if after a year we're still in the same position as we are today, or alternatively, if things have gotten significantly worse, and the Saudis and the Emirates and the Israelis and Hamas and Hezbollah and a whole bunch of other players are involved in what amounts to a regional world war, then in a way all bets are off.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
The tragedy of all of this is that it's so completely unnecessary. There was no need whatsoever to invade, especially after Trump had declared several months ago that he had obliterated nuclear
Yeah.
Exactly.
capacities.
Yeah.
And the same is true of Putin. He could have exerted pressure on the Ukrainians by all sorts of economic, political, and other measures. There was no need for him to start a regional war that he's likely to lose.
In the future, so going forward, Alex, what should we be paying attention to, say, over the next few months to better understand where this whole business is going?
The key here, and this reflects my own interests, is pay attention to Putin's standing amongst Russian elites. I believe strongly that Putin is far weaker than he makes himself out to be. And we may be approaching the point where he is so weak that he may be replaced. And then, of course, Mr. Trump. The difference being that, when Putin says something, he usually means it and sticks to his guns.
Yes.
In Trump's case, we have no idea. We still have no idea what he means when he says something. So, we're forced to pay attention, even though it seems like a waste of time for most of the time. And just as with Putin, we should be on the lookout for dissident voices, statements by official opposition, by officials criticizing Putin indirectly or directly. We need to pay the same attention here to the Marjorie Greens, to the Tucker Carlsons.
Right.
People who may still be ethically challenged, to put it mildly, but at least appear to have seen the light on some particularly important issues. And if they continue multiplying, this will obviously have a significant impact.
Yes.
Oh, and obviously, you mentioned the next 6 months. The November elections are critical.
Thank you, as usual, for your insights.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love to hear from you, so please visit our website at nowletstalkthepodcast.com and send us your comments and questions. We'll see you next time.